Hi everyone, in this video I wanted to talk about Dragonite's other build, where you use Outrage and Extreme Speed. The playstyle of this build is completely different to the Hyper Beam build that you usually go on Dragonite. This is because Outrage reduces Dragonite's attack range to melee, which means you'll be getting up close and personal with the enemy team. With this build you want to do two things. You want to stick as close to the enemy as possible, and you want to be attacking non-stop. So first let's discuss the skills that make up this build, and then we'll talk about some items that will help support this playstyle. So the defining skill of the build is Outrage. When using Outrage, Dragonite stomps the ground, dealing damage to enemies around him, activating the bonus effect of the last boosted attack he used. He will then get a buff for 5 seconds, increasing his attack speed, converting all his attacks into melee boosted attacks, and then gaining the water, electric, and fire boosted attacks in that order. When the buff ends, Dragonite is briefly stunned unless he can reactivate his Outrage. This is important to keep in mind, especially if you're scoring, as coming out of Outrage will stop your scoring animation and you'll have to start again. There are ways around it, like using full heal, or having a Pokemon like Blissey use Safeguard. At level 13, the buff also reduces the length of hindrances on Dragonite such as slows and stuns. So there's a lot to unpack in this move, but what we really need to talk about is his boosted attacks and their special effects. Dragonite has 3 different types of boosted attacks. As a Dratini, you'll have a blue boosted attack. When you evolve the Dragonair, you gain access to a yellow boosted attack, and finally when you evolve the Dragonite, you gain access to his final boosted attack, which is red. The blue, yellow, and red boosted attacks are the water, electric, and fire boosted attacks in the skill description. It's probably a reference to how people used to run Flamethrower, Ice Beam, and Thunderbolt on Dragonite because it was such a strong Pokemon in the original games. Each of Dragonite's boosted attacks will reduce the cooldowns on his skills by 1 second. On top of this, the blue boosted attack will heal him for 5% of his max HP, the yellow one will stun enemies for 1 second when it hits, and the red one will deal 10% of the enemy's remaining HP. So the good thing about this skill is that it does so much. It lets you heal, it lets you stun, it lets you do more damage, and on paper all these effects are really great. And because it changes all your attacks into boosted attacks, each of your attacks will now reduce your cooldowns by 1 second. But because you have to cycle through each of the boosted attacks, you don't always get to apply the effect you want when you want it. The only time you actually get to choose is when you activate Outrage, as the stomp also applies the last boosted attack effect to your stomp damage. So this can result in you healing 10% of your max HP, it can result in you stunning the enemy for 2 seconds, or it can result in you dealing a ton of damage to the enemy based on their remaining HP. Almost in every situation, the 2-second stun is the best option. However, in a chaotic teamfight, you can't really control which one is gonna go off, as you'd have to track the cycle during the chaotic teamfight. Imagine trying to play the game and in the back of your head all you hear is yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue. And only after you hit the yellow boosted attack can you use it again. If you ever played League of Legends and played Twisted Fate, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. The other skill in this build is Extreme Speed, which is a targeted dash which locks onto the enemy Pokemon, deals damage, and then knocks up Pokemon in an area around the targeted Pokemon. Extreme Speed also resets the cooldown of Multiscale, which is Dragonite's passive, and at level 11, Extreme Speed removes slows that are applied to Dragonite. So let's take a little detour to talk about Multiscale. So Multiscale is a passive that only Dragonite has. Dratini and Dragonair have a different passive, which means the second half Extreme Speed doesn't actually do anything until you turn into Dragonite at level 8. So what Multiscale does is if you take damage from an enemy Pokemon, you take 20% less damage for 2.5 seconds. Usually this passive has a cooldown of 15 seconds, however Extreme Speed resets it, which means it will tankier every time you use Extreme Speed. Because if you use Extreme Speed on an enemy Pokemon, you're almost guaranteed to be taking damage. So what you have is a skill that helps you close the distance, and a skill that makes you melee, but boosts all your attacks. You can definitely see the synergy between these two moves, but this build definitely does have a lot of strengths and weaknesses. If we're talking purely about the strengths, an Outraged Dragonite is probably one of the last Pokemon you want to be fighting in melee range. I don't think there are many or even any Pokemon that can fight him head on in a 1v1 situation when he's in Outrage. He has self-sustain, he has damage reduction, he has crowd control, and he even has the damage to back it up. However, if we think about the weaknesses of this build, even though his yellow boosted attack provides a short stun, and Extreme Speed provides a dash and knock up, he actually has quite a lot of trouble sticking onto the enemy Pokemon. Not to mention that Outrage doesn't even make you unstoppable, meaning you're still affected by slows and stuns. At higher levels, Extreme Speed will cancel out the slows, but you can't really do anything about the stuns, which means that you need to be running full heal, or else it'll just slow and stun you after you use Extreme Speed and walk away. Given that a lot of Pokemon run Eject Button these days, it's really hard for Dragonite to stick onto the enemy Pokemon, and that's not even taking into account the number of Pokemon who have dashes built into their kit. If you run Eject Button, you can get crowd controlled. If you run full heal, they can just get away from you. I'm not sure what he needs, but he needs a little bit more for this build to be truly viable. I would love to see in the future if they made him unstoppable, or even gave him a small move speed boost while in Outrage, because at the moment it's definitely not worth running X speed on Dragonite, and you don't want to be using your Unite move at the start of each fight just to get the move speed bonus. However, this seems to be the best way to play this build right now, because at least if you're running Body Barrier you get the shield as well, and it makes you that much harder to deal with. Speaking of his Unite move is a super long range jump, where Dragonite knocks up and deals damage where he lands. The further you jump, the more Unite charge it uses up, so it can use up anywhere between 25% and 100% of his Unite charge. This move can be used on the spot to give you the Unite move bonuses, such as increased move speed and decreased move cooldowns. Or it can be used to travel the map, so that you can get to objectives faster, prevent scores, or do scores of your own. For items, Body Barrier is a must. Given how often you can use his Unite move, not running Body Barrier is like asking to get your ass beat. I mean, why would you intentionally try to make the game harder for yourself? The other two items is where Dragonite has a lot of flexibility though. One popular option is to run Muscle Band, because you want to get as many auto attacks in as you can, so you can take advantage of the boosted attacks while in Outrage. More boosted attacks means more cooldown reduction, which means you get to use your skills more often, which means you do more damage. Other popular items are Score Shield to take advantage of the Body Barrier, and the fact that Dragonite's Unite move has such a large range. Together, this lets you get in a few sneaky dunks that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise, allowing you to create pressure on the enemy team. Some other items I want to discuss for Dragonite are Focus Band, Weakness Policy, and Razor Claw. Focus Band increases your survivability, and given how often Dragonite is in the thick of things, you can never go wrong with extra survivability. In a similar vein, because Dragonite's always taking damage, an item like Weakness Policy could increase the amount of damage he outputs, and it provides a little bit of tankiness through the HP it gives you. It is a little bit more situational, but he doesn't really scale off the attack damage too well, as a lot of your damage will come through the red boosted attacks in this build. But the item I really want to highlight here is Razor Claw. Right now with Razor Claw and Dragonite, if Dragonite uses a skill, he actually gets the slow activation from Razor Claw, even though he's a ranged Pokemon. So he can currently take advantage of this and slow enemy Pokemon and continue wailing on them while in Outrage. The problem with this item is his cooldowns are a little bit too long with this build to continue activating the Razor Claw slow. This is after taking into account the boosted attack cooldown reduction that he gets in Outrage. You could argue that this might work if you're running Dragon Dance instead of Extreme Speed, but then you lose some tankiness and the crowd control that Extreme Speed gives you, which could be a sacrifice you're willing to make. As I mentioned earlier, on Dragonite, if you're running Outrage, you're probably going to be running Full Heal or Eject Button. However, I can see an argument being made for Gold Getter, as it lets you get those scores in at the end of the game that you wouldn't normally be able to get. Other than that, I have seen some Dragonites running Slow Smoke, but the slow just doesn't last long enough for it to be fully viable on Dragonite. Thanks for checking out my Outrage Dragonite guide. Hope that you found this video useful. If you like this type of video, please like and subscribe for more content. I'll be slowly releasing these videos for all the Pokemon and their different builds. Since you're interested in Dragonite, please check out my other video on his other build, Hyper Beam, and make a decision for yourself which build works for you.